I think it's so important to reiterate that point I made earlier, that I think the independent press serve as this powerful check on the corporate media, and can be leaders in the sense of spurring the corporate media to cover stories and to treat as newsworthy people who are otherwise marginalized or excluded altogether from definitions of what counts as newsworthy. And then I think bringing that back into kind of a classroom context, or maybe not limited to classrooms, but education broadly, part of like everyone's continuing education, the need for critical media literacy education to be part of a kind of a systemic curriculum without ceding that curriculum to the powers that be that have a keen interest in a non-critical version of media literacy.
Coming from an educational standpoint, I hope that the United States would actually step to its agreement to implement critical media literacy into U.S. curricula, from elementary school all the way to post-secondary. That's something that I believe could be a game changer.
The movement for critical media literacy is essential for. We're lucky at college level. We can teach those kinds of courses, and in some high schools. But that needs to be a kind of a sense where we're developing even youthful citizenship in grade school and middle school, and much more in high school, would go a long way to empower youth, to make them feel like they can, in fact, affect the world around them, that they don't have to feel defeated all the time by just looking at this inevitable landscape that the media presents, but they can actually think of their own narratives, write themselves into the narratives of action and a politics that they choose, that they then could understand their place in it, their position within that economic and social life, and if they don't like it, then they can actively affect the world in which they live. That's one of the main messages, and one of the reasons that mainstream media is so, establishment media is such a desert and a wasteland, is there's no way that people can see themselves in those narratives, because democracy and people are largely excluded from those narratives.
So independent media, what are you independent from, right? Even if you have your own political agenda, which are separated from established partisanship. I think financial transparency and transparency about your bias, because there's no such a thing as neutral media or objective media, right? So I think transparency, we need to distinguish transparency and neutrality, or transparency or objectivity, right? So you can be explicitly promoting your partisanship, but you should be really transparent about how you getting your sources, how you are detecting your sources and stories and covering them and publishing them, by whose money and where you're spending these money sources, things like that. So I found really fascinating that a lot of alternative medias in the U.S. Mediascape are doing a great job doing that, being transparent with their donors and readers. So yeah.